Okay, I'm trying to get some of the settings adjusted before we formally start the meeting. It'll be just a second. Okay, it looks like I'm sharing the screen now, which is good. Let's pull up our PowerPoint. Okay. So we are in week 4 of EDU 503, Applied Research Methods, where the goal for our course is to complete a research proposal, a graduate level research proposal for a study that could be conducted. We're not conducting the study. However, the proposal is designed so that it could be implemented in a later course or in a later study. So just wanted to talk to you for just a moment about return on investment. I have the capability through the use of Canvas to follow how often you have signed on and your total activity while you were signed on, and hello, and also to notate where you have been when you've signed on. So if there's any confusion about when an assignment was turned in or your availability online as far as what you've been doing, I am able to follow that information through Canvas. And then there's also a report called Activity by Date, and it indicates, for example, how many times you viewed the page or how many times you have actually participated. So this usually only becomes an issue if a student is struggling in the class and there's some concern about whether or not they're going to be able to be successful. I just wanted you to be aware that this is how I follow my students online. Usually students have been online at least 20 hours by now at this point in the term. And I actually have some students in this class who have been online working less hours than I have grading papers. So sometimes I go back just to see, okay, does this person need more assistance? Are they spending the right amount of time on the right things? What advice can I offer them? So just as a reminder, every week, the discussion board initial posts are due Wednesdays by 11:59 p.m. I give you an extension until Thursday at 11:59 p.m. because this meeting takes place at 6 o'clock, and I want you to have the information you need beforehand before you complete the assignment. And then the written assignments are due Saturdays by 11:59, and the discussion board reply is due Sunday by 11:59. Now, at the end of week 5, which is the last week of class, everything is due as far as written assignments and discussion board replies that Saturday by 11:59. So we talked a little bit about scales of measurement last week, how you have the nominal, ordinal, and interval levels for the purposes of this course that you may be discussing, and how nominal is simply to name or label or identify variables. Ordinal measurement may talk about best to worst or most to least. The order is important, but the amount of space between poor and below average may not be significant. And then interval measurement is very important to note that the distance between A and B is very specific, and B and C and D. So interval measurement is much more specific and would be used with your quantitative measures. So to make it a little bit more clear, I've added the properties and examples of these types of scales on this slide. For example, with nominal, the scale may be a yes or no answer, an A or a B answer, but there is no, it's one or the other. They may be identical or different. And then the application is usually a classification, such as gender, geographic area, social class, ethnicity, that type of thing. And the type of statistical measures used with nominal measurement are percentages, proportions, mode, and chi-square. In ordinal measurement, that's again, like we said, you're in rank order for all of your measures, and the rules are greater or smaller, and it's a ranking, so most to least or least to most. And so the type of statistical measures you would use would be percentile, median, rank order, rank order correlation, and ANOVA. And those are mentioned in your textbook. You do not have to know how to conduct those statistical analyses. You just have to understand when it would be appropriate to use them. As a matter of fact, if you end up doing a study in the future where you are doing quantitative analysis, you can always hire a math person to do your quantitative analysis if needed. And then with interval types of measurement, we have Likert scale, Thurstone, associative, semantic differential. Those are types of attitude scales that you can use. The distance between adjacent ranks are equal. That's the important component for interval. And then you would use items such as mean. Standard deviation is a huge one in interval measurement because it tells you the distance between each item and whether or not the difference is consistent. And then t-test, ANOVA, and regression. And again, like I said, you will not have to do those statistical analyses. You just need to be able to match up what type you would use for your study. Now, the research hypothesis, as we talked about last week, we'll talk about the difference between variables or the relationship among variables. And we also talked about independent variables and dependent variables where with this example, leveled reading instruction increases students' reading performance. The independent variable is the type of reading instruction, and it's constant at the beginning of the experiment. It does not change, and it's not dependent on the other variable. And then the dependent variable, for example, student performance, is what you expect to change because of the independent variable. So if you just know that the independent causes the dependent to change, you will understand that what you're applying to your study is independent, and the method you are measuring, or the item that you are measuring, getting your statistics from, is the dependent. Hello. I think someone is trying to sign on. They may have to call in. So let me, okay. Hang on just a minute. I'm going to try to mute you guys so that we don't have, if you need to speak, that's fine. You can unmute yourself, but we're getting a lot of background noise, and want to make sure that everybody can see and hear. I'm going to go back one slide. Okay, so when we put all these examples together, you have your hypothesis. My hypothesis is that leveled reading instruction increases students' reading performance. The independent variable is the type of instruction. So my independent variable will be leveled reading instruction. My nominal measurement for that will be group A versus group B. Okay, so if I have different groups of reading groups of students that are going to be compared, I will use those letters as nominal measurement. Then the dependent variable is student performance or test scores. So I would use interval measurement using a 10-point grading scale where, for example, 90% to 100% would be an A, and so on and so forth. So in this study, there would be both nominal and interval measurement. So a hypothesis is what you're wanting to test. You develop a research hypothesis, and then you develop a null and alternative hypothesis. Now, if you are doing a qualitative study and you're only using a research question, you will not have a hypothesis, and you will not have a null and an alternative hypothesis, because the result of a qualitative study is a hypothesis. So it's geared in a little bit different direction, because in a qualitative study, the data leads you to the conclusion. The question comes throughout, not at the very beginning of the study. So if your research question is, how does leveling for reading instruction impact students' reading ability? Obviously, I'm going to have to change this into a hypothesis, because we measure reading ability based on how students perform on assessments. So the hypothesis would be, the research question would be, how does leveling for reading instruction impact students' reading ability? And the research hypothesis, which is my prediction, leveling for reading instruction increases students' reading ability. That's what I think is going to happen. That's what I think the study is going to show me. And the fewer hypotheses you have, the shorter the study and the fewer variables that you have. So if you're trying to answer multiple questions in one study, I would advise against that. I advise keeping it as simple as possible. The null hypothesis says, no, the results are not true. The hypothesis was not true. Now, it doesn't mean that the opposite is true of the hypothesis. It just means, as it is stated, the hypothesis is not true. So it's saying leveling results in no difference in students' reading ability. Now, it's possible that leveled reading instruction decreases students' reading ability, but probably not going to happen. So the null says, nope, this type of reading instruction does not increase students' reading ability. We cannot prove that with this test. And then the alternative, which is a very strange name, just simply says the same thing as the research hypothesis. The leveling for reading instruction increases students' reading ability. I don't know why it's called the alternative hypothesis, because it's the original hypothesis, and I feel like that's what it should be called. But it's the alternative to the null, and you always have to consider the null, which is, no, this study does not produce the results that we predicted. So just as a note to you, you're not required to actually conduct the study and complete statistical analysis. You do not have to do the computations. All you're doing is proposing a study. You are required to write a lucid research proposal and articulate the types of statistical measures and analyses that would be appropriate for your study. So you need to know what type of analysis matches up with what type of variables in what type of studies. That is pretty much the main idea for this course, other than the APA formatting and how to find quality resources. You've got to know what matches up. So that's the main objective. So I found a link, and I hope the link works. Sometimes it works for me in the middle of a Zoom meeting, and sometimes it doesn't. This link actually goes through and explains the different types of measurement, nominal, ordinal, and interval, and also includes ratio, which is not covered in this class, but it gives really great examples. As if
hey guys, does this day sound familiar? You go to a confusing lecture, you ask for help.
Types of data: nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio. Data is central to statistical analysis. When we wish to find out more about a phenomenon or process, we collect data. Usually, we collect several measures on each person or...
Okay, I'm not going to show you the whole video for 6 minutes and 19 seconds, but this is the most basic explanation of types of data and types of measurement and how it works. So I suggest that on your own time, you go back through the Zoom PowerPoint that I provided for you on just a couple of days ago, and go into the PowerPoint and locate this slide and use that link to really clarify for you the types of measurements and instruments and analysis needed for the studies. So assignment number 4, you are using the research proposal guide as you go through this process to design the study. And you need to cover the design of the study, the instrumentation, the statistical procedures, the definition of terms, the proposal summary, and the references. And if you will go to the sample research proposal that was provided for you at the beginning of the course, there are excellent examples of exactly what these things look like. The design of the study fits with the research question, the hypothesis, and the levels of measurement. For example, if we're talking about the study that I just conducted, hypothetically, and I'm saying that leveled reading instruction increases student achievement, and I say I'm going to do a qualitative analysis, and I'm going to observe the students, and I'm going to interview the students, I'm going to observe the teachers and see which method they like better and they feel like they learn more. That would not give me an effective conclusion, because I need to know if those students actually perform better after that type of leveled reading instruction. So that study would be not okay, because I need to find out statistically how many students improved and how much did they improve based on the baseline information that I have. So we've got to follow that. Now, the reference section here on this page where it says references, this is where you take all of your references from all of the sections and you put them into your proposal. So this is you don't have to do this week. You can just use the references this week for what you're doing for just this assignment: the design, the instrumentation, the statistical procedures, the definition of terms, and the proposal summary. However, in week 5, all of your references from all 4 weeks will go into the proposal. And this is where you take all that we have done from week 2 until week 5, and we've meshed them into a formal research proposal that could actually be conducted in a graduate study. So that is the whole purpose of us doing pieces and parts at a time. So it may seem a little bit awkward week to week to do these pieces, but once you put it together and rearrange a few things, it will make a whole lot more sense. So the rubric gets a little bit more complicated the more work that you do. And like I said before, APA style, you get 2 points, 1 point, half a point, or no points at all. That could be the difference in an A and a B, or a D and an F. The content, the elements and components, those are about, do you know what you're doing with this material? Are you doing what the assignment has asked you to do? Use of language, this is where, are you writing as a graduate student? Are you using words like great and so and I think and probably and I would do it this way and this is really good? That's not the type of language you read in your textbook, and that's not the type of language that you read in your journal articles. You are supposed to be writing as if you are publishing, and so your writing should sound more formal and in standard English. So if I make notations on your paper, this is vague, it means be specific. If you say, there is so much research out there, I want you to say, be more specific. How many is so much? Be more specific and be more exact with your answers. The methodology, does this fit the research question? That's what I was talking about before. If I'm doing a qualitative study and I'm talking about doing a statistical analysis or collecting test scores, something is not aligned there. So the whole purpose of this rubric is to make sure you understand what you're doing while you're doing it. I've had a few students in the past turn in assignments that look like book reports, reports that came from journal articles, and they just talk about the subject. That is not what you're doing. You are taking a topic and you're narrowing it to a research question, and then you're creating a hypothesis, and you are developing a specific study about a specific field in education, a specific group of subjects at a specific location, and you're proposing what should happen, or you're creating a research question and you're investigating in a certain environment and you're finding out what's going on based on what the participants tell you. So basically, have the concepts been interpreted correctly? Does the method match the research question? Is your writing graduate level? Is it concise and grammatically correct? Are all components present and meaningful? Are important issues raised with this study? And is the proposal presented in a professional academic format? I want, when you leave me in just a week or so, a little over a week, when you leave me, I want, when you go to your next class, I want those professors to say, yeah, you had Dr. Sands for research methods. I can tell you had Dr. Sands because she taught you the English, she taught you the APA style, she taught you the organization, she taught you how to locate resources that were valuable to the course of study. And my students do very well because I am very structured and very specific about that, but it's important to me for you to leave me prepared for the next level. So the discussion board prompt this week is about your variables. Identify and describe each of the variables, independent and dependent, for differences or correlation or correlational variables for relationship. Be sure to describe the level of measurement of each variable. So remember that independent and dependent talks about difference. So if my independent variable is leveled reading instruction and my dependent variable is student performance, then I have to have a type of measurement for each one of those. So if we wanted to change that to a correlational study so that we had correlational variables, we might say when students have leveled reading for 50 minutes a week, their performance increases based on that amount of time. When they have leveled reading instruction for 60 minutes a week, their performance increases. So you're saying that when the amount of reading instruction increases, the performance increases. So correlation means positive correlation, they both go up, or negative correlation, one goes up and one goes down. And so then you have to determine a manner that you're going to assign the data, nominal, ordinal, or interval, based on what we described in the explanation before. So this is the same rubric that has been around all 4 weeks, where your initial posting has to be logical, specific, relevant, effective, in professional format. It has to be an APA format. I'm a little bit less strict about grammar and mechanics on the postings because I don't want to discourage your thought process. I just want you to communicate with others, but the references have to be there, and the response has to be thoughtful from multiple perspectives and reflective. And if your initial post is not turned in by Thursday, because I gave you an extension, there's a 1 point late deduction, which you guys already know that. So just as a warning, your final assignment is not to simply turn in all sections as described in weeks 2 through 5. Your final assignment consists of a complete APA formatted research proposal. The proposal is very specific, and you will need to rearrange some of your content and elaborate with greater detail. And the course does provide a complete proposal. And I want you to know that at the very beginning of week 5, I can provide you with an additional example. I can send that to you by email in PDF format. I have a student who completed this section with me last term who had a phenomenal example, and it's not included in the course yet, but I can send it to you by email, or I can send it to you in the announcements. And everything she did was very precise and exactly on point. So I think that it would be a good example for you as well. Okay, so if you ask a question, just take yourself off of mute, and I wanted to find out if you have any questions.
Yes, I have a question. Just to clarify, with the assignment that's due, the discussion that's due for tomorrow, if you have an independent, you said differences, if your study is focusing on differences, then you would have an independent and a dependent variable. But if it's showing relationships, then it's positive or negative correlation. So my question is, if I'm doing a correlational study, do I still need to identify my independent and dependent variables?
It depends on the study. If you're saying, what is the topic of your study? I will probably remember if you mention it.
Yeah, I'm doing the looping in middle school, having an impact on student achievement. Okay,
so what you're going to do is looping would be your independent variable there, and student achievement would be the dependent variable, because you're trying to indicate that looping improves their performance, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you're saying it wouldn't necessarily be correlational. You can make it correlational, but you're saying that looping improves student achievement. Correlational would mean if you continue to loop, they continue to improve at a faster rate. So the more you loop them, the better they perform. That's what correlation would do. It would say there's a relationship between looping and student achievement. But if you're looking to see the level of impact, you would do an independent dependent, where looping is your independent and student achievement is your dependent. And you could even compare students who only looped for 1 year, students who looped for a couple of years, students who looped for all 3 years in middle school before going to high school. So that the way you phrase it is up to you, but basically your looping is impacting achievement. So I would set that up as independent and dependent. And then what I would do is I would have the performance of students who did not have looping, the difference between the students who didn't have looping and the students who did have looping. That's where you're finding the difference. But if you're just looking at the correlation, you want to make sure you communicate that the more we loop, the better students do. And that's saying that a positive correlation. The more looping for 3 years, the better students perform. Okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have a question?
I have another one if no one else has one. When you grade our work, we're able to see the notations that you make, because I don't know how to do that, how to pull that up.
Okay, the notations I actually make on the draft. So when you open up the assignment that you submitted, there are actual comments on the draft. And then when you go into the rubric where it has the thought bubble, you click on the thought bubble and there are comments there. And there are also comments in the section, if there are comments in the section where I give you reminders, such as, discussion board feedback has been provided or whatever. So the actual draft that you turned in is saved in SpeedGrader with my comments on it. If you have a problem viewing that, I will send me an email. I'll download it and I'll send it to you as an email. That way you can see the difference.
Okay.
And then if you see a thought on your draft, if you see a thought bubble in the margin, you click on it and there are more comments there too.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, so if there are no other questions, I'm going to end the meeting. And just know that you can email me. I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. And I don't mind helping you. I don't mind sending you examples. I don't mind previewing before you turn in the final proposal. I don't want you to think, Karen, that you need to redo your entire proposal just based on semantics. So I'm going to go back and look at your proposal. And I'm sure that if you decided on correlational, it's fine. You just need to really clarify the impact define looping, which you've done, and the impact it has on student performance. We have to know for sure that it's the looping that caused the increase in student performance.
Okay.
Rather than, this 8th grade class is high performing or something like that. Okay. But I think your literature review covers a lot of that material. So, okay. Thank you very much. And I'll be available by email if you have any questions, and have a good weekend. And we're almost through your first class. Have a great night.
Okay.